Right. Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You know that music we just played? Does anyone recognise it? You're too young. Mastermind. You know, that mastermind teaching, I still, for many years now, still I have nightmares around it. But for those of you who don't know the programme, basically it's a bunch of people who know a lot about various subjects. And they set it up in a sort of interrogation room. And these people sort of come up one by one and they sit in this black chair. And there's this big light, like that thing, shining on them really, really heavily. And there was this Icelandic guy, they've changed the presenter now, but there was this Icelandic guy called Magnus Magnusson. And he's sort of saying very aggressively, name, and they say the name, specialist subject. And they say, you know, whatever they were good at, like, you know, Shakespeare, history plays, or Keynesian economics, or whatever it was. And anyway, I've had this nightmare where I am this person, and I get to this point where he shouts at me, specialist subject. And I just sort of freeze, because I just feel I don't know anything about anything. And it's quite fun. Then I wake up, and I think, wake up in this sweat. Oh my God, like 50 years of my life I've just wasted not knowing anything about anything. And then I remember I have two things I actually do know something about. And when LBS phoned me up last week, and they said, will you come and do this talk? I had exactly the same feeling. I thought, wow, I'm back in my mastermind nightmare. I don't know anything about anything. But I did mention to them the two things I do know something about. And they chose this one that I should talk about. Can you read that? You read it out?
Yeah.
7 characteristics of highly innovative people. And I'm going to talk about that today, but you're very lucky that they didn't choose the other one I know quite a lot about, because the only other subject I know a lot about is the UK detergent market, 1986 to 1989. I was a brand manager at Procter & Gamble. I knew everything. I know everything about washing powders in that 3-year period in the 80s. And probably my biggest faux pas was an ad I made for a brand called Bold 3. If you know a brand called Bold 3, it's a washing powder and a fabric conditioner combined, so you can do your conditioning and washing all in one. And it was targeted at very busy housewives. And we produced an ad which had this woman jumping out, riding a helicopter, and then jumping out in a backpack. And she parachuted to the ground into her back garden. And she walked into her utility room and put the washing on. And the voiceover we had going over it was, I demand more out of life and more out of my washing powder. And after that, I decided advertising probably wasn't for me, and I went into innovation. And I'm going to talk to you about this, not detergents. But if you do want me to talk about detergents, I can do that another time. One thing I find in all of these conferences is that a lot of people use words I don't understand. Yeah? And I thought I used to understand the word strategy, and then I heard it so much that I just don't understand it anymore. And I heard people say to me the other day, they wanted to show me their strategic plan. And I was like, well, what? Why do you say you want to show me your plan? Like, what's strategic about it? You know what I mean? And I think it's one of those words now that just sort of sounds important. And unfortunately for me, the word innovation has become a bit like that. Kind of, what the hell is innovation? Anyone got any ideas what is innovation? Anyone got any voluntary definitions of what innovation is? Go on, go for it.
Creating something new which didn't exist before.
Lovely, I love that. Any other alternatives? Go for it.
A thick beard and horn rimmed glasses.
Oh wow. Well, look, I really like that. I think you're totally right, but I really like what you said there, because it's so basic, and I think that's what innovation is. Yeah. Innovation is, in my view, stuff you haven't thought about before that makes the world a better place. Yeah. It's really, really as simple as that. And I suppose innovation is the science of not knowing what you're doing, if you like. Yeah. And I know that sounds a bit odd, but actually there is a mindset about not knowing what you're doing, which is very, very powerful, and something that you can really get very, very skilled at, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. But before I do that, so I'm just going to go through my notes. Before I do that, I just want to tell you a bit about myself. My name's Salil Pajwani. I run a company called What If Innovation. I'll tell you about that in a minute. That's my family. My older boy is down there. He's a second year at Durham. My younger boy he left school yesterday, actually, my younger boy, so I'm about to become an empty nester, which is quite frightening. And that's my wife and my dog in the same picture, Domino and Sarah. I left university at the age of 22, 23. I did economics at Cambridge. I worked for Procter & Gamble, as you might guess. for about 7 or 8 years in various different parts of the world. And then I bumped into a couple of friends who launched this company, What If. This is our London office. We are an innovation company. We specialize in stuff you haven't thought of, right? We have got 250 people worldwide. Most of our people work out of the UK or the US. We have an office in China. Last year we worked with in about 50 different countries. And we worked with about 100 different clients, and you will have heard of about 90 of them. There are all sorts of well-known companies in sectors like automotive, consumer goods, energy, food and beverage, retail. We do a lot of work for government, we do a lot of work in financial services, etc., etc. And I suppose what's quite nice about that, it gives us quite a good spectrum of understanding of what kind of innovation problems are on people's minds at the moment. Just to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we do. Really, our business divides into two sort of sectors. The first is what we call innovation challenges, where we help our clients crack innovation problems. And the second is what we call innovation capability, where we help our clients become better at innovation themselves. By the way, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. So just to give you a bit of a flavour, so Disney is one of our clients globally. And I don't know if any of you have got young children, you've been to Euro Disney outside Paris. If you talk to 100 people in the UK who've got kids between the ages of 3 and 16, and you say to them, do you intend to visit Euro Disney in the next 12 months? Something like 95 say yes. Yeah, and then you go back to those same people 1 year later and you say, did you visit Disney in the last 12 months? And something like 30 people out of 100 say yes. Yeah. So you've got this enormous drop off, right? And there's all sorts of reasons why, you know, some wedding comes up and people go on holiday, can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. And Disney gave us this challenge, which is they said, well, how can you create some sort of imperative so that people can actually visit the park when they clearly want to visit the park, but they can actually get on and do it. And we came up with two very, very interesting insights, which those of you who've got young kids will relate to. The first one is when children are about 5 or so, something like 5, there's a sort of inflection point. And if you go to Disney with a child who's under 5 or 6, they actually really believe in the characters. And if you go with a child who's 7 or 8, they have a fantastic time, but it's a shame. And so we tried to create, and then there's another point actually, just as an incidental thing, when they're about 11 or 12, it's all to do with holding hands, right? No 11-year-olds hold hands with mum or dad in the street. But they do actually, interestingly, at Disney Park, which is quite interesting. That's a different story. But for the older kids, we basically tried to create this this piece of communication, which was all about how you can have a completely different Disney experience if your child actually believes it. We call it the Santa Claus effect. If your child actually believes in Disney, in the characters, rather than they just think it's a theme park. And so we created this big thing called the Flying Elephants Club, and it's all about Dumbo. And it's all about how Dumbo can fly. And if you still believe Dumbo can fly, then you can join the Flying Elephants Club. If you don't believe Dumbo can fly, you can't join the There's a ride, there's a club, whatever. But actually what it did was it started to create an imperative. It started to get people to really understand that actually if you don't take this opportunity in the next year, it's gone forever. It's not a nice time, but it's gone forever. And that's the kind of work we do, actually, which is just trying to give you a bit of a flavour, which is trying to get really under the skin of how does the consumer psyche work, and then put in place solutions which actually meet the business need, but actually anchor it to how people's psyche works. And then the other part of our business, which I won't talk about because I know we're short of time, is innovation capability, where we work with our clients to help make them more capable at innovation. And we do training courses, we help run remuneration programs. We do a lot of hiring and firing for our clients as well, which is sort of what I'm going to come and talk about now. But before I do that, let me just let you into a little secret. And I don't know the guys at IDEO or Cisco, you'll agree with me, but I think this is a universal truth about consulting. I think there's only really 3 questions important in consulting. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's 100 questions and people make it very complicated because people like doing that. But actually, there's only 3 really, really important questions in consulting. And the first one is to do with your offer. What can you do that your clients can't do, right? And how can you go to them and say that we can do this, you can't do it, right? You can say that powerfully and believably. See, lots of people writing this down. If you're going to launch consultancies, then remember these 3 questions. So that's the first one. The second one is what sort of people are able to do it, and hopefully, lots of photographs being taken as well. Nice. Hopefully, the kind of people that do it quite unique, yeah, because that's what gives you your edge. And then the third question is how the hell are you going to spot them? Right? And really, if you can actually answer those three questions, all this business about utilization rates and pricing and billability and all of that kind of becomes really, really straightforward. Yeah, because actually those are the only three questions that matter. And today I'm going to focus on question 2, right, which is what sort of people are able to do it? What sort of people are able to do innovation? And you know, innovation is like any skill. It's like playing tennis or playing football or anything like that. There are some people in the world who are naturally better at it than others. Yeah, obviously everyone can be better than they are. Right? I'm a pretty rubbish tennis player, right? I can be a bit better than I am, yeah? I don't think we're going to play in the French Open next week. And the same thing's true of innovation. There are some people who are brilliant at it, and there are a bunch of people who will never be very good at it, but they can be better than they are, and you can make them better than they are, yeah? And what I've had to spend most of my career doing is to try and understand what is it about the people who are really, really good at innovation, right? What characterizes that? Yeah, and what is it about the way their mind works, right, that makes them stand out from people who might be very, very good at other things, but not good at innovation? Yeah, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Is that okay? Are people interested in the subject or not? Very good. Okay, I'll carry on. Okay, the person who actually got me really thinking about this is this. I don't know if you recognise this lady. Her name's Mira Sayal. She's a comedian. She's done a whole load of shows. Probably her most famous one's called Goodness Gracious Me, and she's done the Kumars at 42. Familiar to you or not? Yeah. Anyway, I bumped into her a long time ago now, and she was talking about comedy, and she was saying that it's really interesting in comedy how pretty much everyone who's any good at comedy nowadays is a bit odd. Yeah, they're sort of, they're either foreign or they come from some strange background, or they're a bit strange, or they're an alcoholic or something, or whatever it is. And she used the word eccentric. I don't mean eccentric in the sort of dotty uncle type of definition. I just mean eccentric in the literal sense of the word, kind of outside the center. Yeah. And we started getting into this and started. I was kind of asking her, why is this? And she said, well, if you're going to find something funny, you have to see the world from the outside, yeah? But then if you're going to make it funny, you have to sort of see the world from the inside. It really got me thinking that actually, at its very core, and you can take photographs of the next slide if you like, because this is really at its very core. If you really want an understanding of what good innovation people are like, right, it's really this. Right? Innovators see the world as it isn't as well as the world as it is. Yeah, and that's a really, really, well, that is actually the nub of what makes someone good at innovation. And to a very large extent, it comes naturally. It's one of the reasons why, if you look at people who tend to create wealth in a given country, a lot of them come from outside that country. Because they can see the world as it isn't, whereas when you've been brought up in a country, you see the world as it is. It's a very, very common factor across the time. There's all sorts of stats around that, which I won't bore you with, but to do with actually how people who come from the outside actually are better at making wealth in countries than people who come from the inside. But what's interesting about this definition is that it sort of presents a sort of a tension, doesn't it, or an enigma, yeah? Which is, how can you do both those things at the same time? Yeah. But the reality is some people's brains do work like that and can work like that. And really my job as the person who runs an innovation consultancy is to work out how I can spot the kind of people who have got that duality in their characteristics. So that's at the very, very high level. What I'm going to do now is sort of define this thought in 7 different, slightly more tangible ways to help you kind of get your head around exactly what does this mean, to see the world as it isn't as well as the world as it is. But importantly, both, right? Not one or the other. Yeah? Everyone with me so far? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, so I'll give you 7 principles, and for each principle I'll give you a little story. The first principle is, right, innovators are mad, yet at the same time they are measured. Right? So let me give you a little story. Years ago, we worked on a project for SC Johnson, which is a household cleaning company, on a brand called Toilet Duck, which is a toilet cleaner, not the most glamorous of categories. Anyway, we were looking at all sorts of ways in which we could build the credentials of cleaning credentials of this particular brand. And one of my guys came up with this thought about fire. He'd just been on a holiday in Africa or something like that, a camping holiday, and he was saying that there was no toilets around. By the way, it's not a very nice story. So, what they used to do at these camping sites is dig these big deep holes, right, and then all the people who were camping did their business in these holes, and then when they would leave the camping site, they'd pour some paraffin down the hole and light a match and burn it off. I mean, this is quite interesting, isn't it? So something interesting in this, so this guy said, look, we need to investigate this whole subject of fire, right? Because it's such a powerful thing when it comes to cleaning really, really mucky things. And of course, the client went nuts, and the safety people got involved and said, you can't put paraffin down toilets. But we said that we really, really wanted to. They genuinely thought we were mad, but we said we want to research this thing. And so we did. We got these toilets. We took some consumers into the toilet. We poured some paraffin down, put some matches in, and the whole thing kind of but anyway, everyone started laughing or whatever and saying it was ridiculous and never do it more. But when we started to get into what was going on in people's minds, they actually found it quite attractive. But the reason they found it attractive was because actually there was a whole load of action. One of the worst things about cleaning a toilet is having to sort of put your hands near it, your face near it. And one of the lovely things about fire is you light the match and sort of walk away. Yeah? And we thought this is a really, really interesting thought. Well, we're obviously never going to sell paraffin. We did get into the subject of delegated action. So how can you put something in a toilet where you actually don't physically have to be involved? But then we got into all sorts of effervescent products and fizzing products and self-cleaning products which had movement and all the rest of which did brilliantly well in the market. Yeah. But the point is we would never have got there if we hadn't had this kind of madness of putting the fire down the toilet in the first place. So innovators have to be a bit mad, right? They have to be mad, and they have to sort of embrace that madness as well. Yeah. But if they're only mad, right, they'll end up with stupid stuff, right? So they have to kind of be able to be measured as well and pull it back into reality and accept the fact that the health and safety people at SC Johnson probably not going to like your idea very much, and then massage it into something which might work. Yeah. So principle number one, yeah, mad yet measured. Okay. Happy with that? Yeah. Move on. Yeah. Okay. Next one. Innovators are both visionary and action focused. How many people in the room have read the book, The Everything School? By the way, if you haven't read it, I don't read a lot of business books, actually. I find them really dull and actually incomprehensible. But I do think that this is probably one of the best business books I've ever read, right? And I've become a real follower of Jeff Bezos as a result of that. So one of the really interesting things about Jeff Bezos was the way he approached the Kindle, right? The Kindle really, really took off in Christmas 2010 or 2011, something like that. But actually it was launched in the market in 2006, 4 years before, and basically did nothing. Yeah? But what was really, really interesting was Jeff Bezos was absolutely 100% committed to the fact that even though he hadn't got this execution right, he knew that fundamentally it would be a completely game-changing idea. And over that 4 years, they had business was also poor and they weren't meeting expectations, but they kept changing things here, changing things there, tweaking little knobs here, tweaking little executional items there. Yeah? And in Christmas 2010 or 11 or whatever it was, I can't remember, they hit on this formula which had 3 really, really interesting pieces of it, which meant that if you look at the graph of the Kindle, it sort of went like this, went bang, right? And that inflection point came when they put together these 3 factors. The first one was front lighting, not backlighting. Because that kind of you had to mirror a book, and the idea of actually having something that threw light at you was just not the way that people were used to reading a book. The second one was e-ink, which was just made it a bit less like a computer screen, and a bit more like a textbook. And then the third one was the really interesting one, which is the fact that they knew it would only ever take off if they positioned it as a gift. Because actually anyone who was really, really into reading, right, would never want to spend £150 on a machine because they could buy 50 books for that, or 40, whatever number it's 40 books for that. Whatever. Yeah, but they knew that actually all these people had friends, and all these people had friends that would quite like to give them a Christmas present. And actually positioned as a Christmas present, right, then all of a sudden these Kindles would get into the hands of all these people who really like books, and then all of a sudden You know, rather than having to spend £10 on the book, you could spend £3 on the book and all the rest of it, and the habit would take off, right? And it took them 4 years to work this out. And the really impressive thing about Jeff Bezos is that he knew that actually out there somewhere was a formula that was going to work. And he tinkered with it, he messed with it, he changed this variable and that variable, but he kept the vision the whole time, which is this thing's going to work, and it's going to revolutionize the way that people read books. So second principle, visionary yet action-focused. Third principle, inquisitive yet opinionated. I'm working at the moment with one of my favourite clients is a guy called Nick Jones, who is the CEO of a company called George. George are the clothing arm of the Asda supermarket chain. And Nick is an absolutely incredible character. And by the way, if you want to watch a clothing brand take off in the next 5 years, I strongly recommend you watch George. They're going to do incredibly well under Nick's guidance. But Nick is really clear-minded in terms of where he wants to take that business. And yet, he is the most inquisitive person in the world. Yeah, and he's always looking. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a week in an Asda store actually, where we were looking at all sorts of different options and things like that. Nick spent half his time on the shop floor serving consumers, asking them questions, asking them why they bought this piece of clothing rather than that piece of clothing, and all the time developing his thinking. And yet he came back and he was incredibly opinionated. He didn't let that thinking, obviously it massaged his thinking, but it didn't sway his fundamental opinion. And I think this duality of having someone who's incredibly inquisitive and able to listen and take on board new knowledge, but at the same time be incredibly opinionated when that matters is really critical. So that's the third principle, inquisitive yet opinionated. Fourth one, micro or individual at the same time as macro or market. You know, by the way, I'll give you a clue, give you a little tip. If you're ever interviewing someone and you're looking for someone who's a good innovator and they make actions like this, yeah? Like people go like that sometimes, and they go like that. They move their hands like this. Yeah, don't hide them. Yeah, don't hide them. Right? The reason you shouldn't hide them is because what they're doing is they're thinking about the paper. They're thinking about a piece of paper. They're thinking about chart. But they're actually not thinking about a person. Innovation doesn't exist on pieces of paper. It exists in people's minds and hearts. Yeah, and if people go like this, right, their brain fundamentally goes to paper. Right, and it's very dangerous. Right? So the story about this one is we did some work a while ago for the Ford Motor Company. And we were looking at the Fiesta brand. And the Fiesta brand was looking to target women between the ages of about 28 and 34, who had suddenly decided that, you know, they're suddenly coming to a situation where they could afford a nice car rather than having a rubbish car before that. And one woman in one focus group said something really interesting. Which was, she said, look, this is the first time I've had my own space. And it was like, well, what are you talking about? It's like art. No, it's like space. Right? Anyway, if you look back at this girl's story, she was 17 when she passed her driving test. She shared a car with her mum and dad, and then one of her siblings. Then she went to college. She came back after college, got a job in London, and she was in a shared house. It was a bit of a mucky old shared house and whatever. And then she ended up buying a house, but she bought a house and then rented out all the rooms, so to pay the mortgage. So she basically did all her life. She did drive a car before this Ford Fiesta that she was buying, but it was a real flat out thing. So actually, all her life up until the age of 28, she had never had any space at all. Yeah, and this was the first time she had a piece of real estate that actually was her own. Right? We thought this is really interesting, right? And it was one person in one instance who told us this story. But we extrapolated this. We said, this is a really big thought, which is this isn't a car, right? This is an oversized handbag, right? And when you actually position it as an oversized handbag, right, you can get into all sorts of really interesting things about what happens in this car. But you have to make that leap. You can only make that leap if you think micro. If you think like this, in terms of charts, you won't get that. You have to be able to make that leap, right? And then extrapolate it to the macro, and then start looking at actually what's your business idea. But don't have people to go like that. Yeah? Remember that one? Yeah? Good. Next thing, next one. Oh, yeah, next one. Sorry, I lost my there you go. Yeah. Okay, next one. People who are good at innovation are great listeners, but they're also, really importantly, great ignorers. Yeah, because you can listen too much. Right. So let me give you a story about an instance where people listen too much. It's a story from my old Procter & Gamble days. Actually, I'd left Procter & Gamble by this time. People familiar with a brand called Wash and Go? Vidal Sassoon Wash and Go. It's called Per Plus in the US. Stick your hand up if you're familiar with this brand. Yeah. It's a shampoo and conditioner in one. It was actually launched in 1989. It took the market by storm. It's made billions and billions of pounds Procter & Gamble over the years. But the problem with it was that it was always a generic idea. It was always an idea that people could copy and they could just do the same thing. So over time, this sort of business got eroded. Anyway, so I left Procter & Gamble by this stage, and I was in a chemist, and I saw a bottle of a shampoo, and it said on it, it said Wash and Go Solo. Yeah. So this was Wash and Go shampoo and conditioner in one without the conditioner. So just and I was like, oh my god. And so I phoned up all my friends at P&G. I said, what the hell is going on? How on earth did you launch this stupid idea? And of course, the idea was taken off the shelves in a few months' time. It's clearly ridiculous. But actually, when they told me the story of how it was launched, you sort of understood how it could have come about, because it's the sort of way that corporate logic works that allows ridiculous things to happen. Yeah. So what happened was this, right? And this is third hand, but anyway, it's quite funny. Wash and Go went to market leadership, share started to erode and whatever. About that time, Procter & Gamble launched a brand called Pantene. Yeah, people obviously familiar with Pantene, whatever you want to call it. And Pantene went to market leadership. So you had this office over this side of the building where the Pantene brand manager was kind of lording it over everyone, kind of like, you know, he was a market leader, or she was a market leader, and the Wash and Go brand manager was the doghouse where everything was going horribly wrong. So Wash and Go brand manager does a piece of analysis, and they say, well, actually, there's three parts to the hair care market. There's a shampoo sector, subsector, there's a conditioner subsector, and then there's a two-in-one subsector. And actually, if you look at Pantene, yeah, Pantene has got whatever it is, I'm making the numbers up now, 15% share. And 8% of that share is in the shampoo, right? 4% is in conditioner, and 3% is in two-in-one. Whereas if you look at the Wash and Go, Wash and Go's only got an 8% share of the market, but it's all in two-in-one. Yeah? Ergo, right, Wash and Go's more successful than Pantene, right? But the only problem with it doesn't play in these other two sectors. So let's launch a brand that plays in the other two. And you can see the meetings, can't you? You can see how these meetings would work. I can see them really clearly because I know the characters, and I know exactly how that logic would have worked. And people would have followed each step of the way and gone, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, D leads to E, listen, nonsense. Yeah? But it happens, right? My point is you can listen too much. Yeah? And of course, it's really important to listen to your consumers. By the way, I can talk to you for half an hour about this whole subject of listening. It's a really, really interesting one. But at the same time, it's really, really important to be an ignorer, right? And to say, no, right? I'm not going to listen to that. It doesn't make sense. Yeah? And somebody who can do both things starts to profile themselves a bit like a good innovator. Okay, next thing. Next characteristics. Innovators tend to be both nurturers and evaluators. One really interesting thing about people who are good at innovation is that, and you might find this surprising, but it's absolutely 100% true, is people who are good at innovation are good at arithmetic. There is no one I've come across who's really good at innovation who isn't good at arithmetic. Right? Why? Because people who are good at arithmetic can size things very quickly. Yeah? Just roughly. Yeah? My boy, actually, well, I showed you a picture of my younger boy. He's about to go to university. He's a real, he's really big into pure maths. He's actually got a place at Oxford to do pure maths. And when he was about 5 or 6, his teacher had identified these 4 kids who were good at maths, and she'd put them in the front of the class like this, and she'd come in, and the first thing she would say is, she'd point at one of them and she'd go, 56 times 48, guess. Right? And they'd have to guess. They'd have to go 2,500. Right? And the point was not how do you manipulate numbers, but how do you conceptualize orders of magnitude. Yeah? People who are good at innovation are good at maths. Or not, sorry, they're not good at maths, they're good at arithmetic. right? The reason they're good at arithmetic is everything can be a good idea, right? Only some things can be big ideas, right? And people who are good at innovation instinctively are able to distinguish a big idea from a small idea, not necessarily just a good idea from a bad idea. Yeah, really, really important thing. If you're going to find someone who's good at innovation, right, test their maths. But ask them questions like, one question I always ask people is things like, how many televisions are in the UK? And literally half the people who ask this question, they go, I don't know, I don't know anything about televisions. They don't need to, just guess, work it out. Yeah? And it doesn't matter if you are 50% wrong, it doesn't matter. What I'm interested in is understanding how someone's mind can calculate those sort of things. Yeah? Anyone? No. Okay, and last one, right? Innovators are inherently light-hearted, yeah? But actually they're serious as well, yeah? And they're light-hearted because sometimes, like when you're doing this stuff on toilets or on flying elephants or whatever it is, right? It is a bit funny, isn't it? It is a bit ridiculous and it's a bit bonkers that we spend our lives working on such trivia. But actually there's a serious side to it as well, and there's a serious commercial side to it as well. I have rarely come across, maybe one or two, but rarely come across people who are good at innovation who haven't got a slight twinkle in their eye, because they're dealing with, their mind has to go to how ridiculous the world is. Because it's only when you start seeing how ridiculous the world is, you're able to do something about it. Yeah. So there you go. That's my talk. I've come in 10 minutes below schedule, which is great. Those 7 points, just to reiterate: mad yet measured, visionary yet action-focused, inquisitive yet opinionated, micro yet macro, great listeners and great ignorers, nurturers and evaluators, and then light-hearted and serious, right? Really easy to find all of those characteristics. Really hard to find that kind of tension in the same person. As I said before, there are only 3 questions that matter in consultancy. What can you do that your clients can't? We're not talking about that today. What sort of people are able to do it? That's what we've talked about. And then, I don't know if I ever get invited back after this, but if I do, well, I might well talk to you about the 3rd question, which is how the hell do you find them? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sal. That's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move straight ahead into our final speaker for the day. There's been a couple of questions. Yes, there will be a Q&A session, an opportunity for you to pose your questions. So if you've been jotting them down as we've been going through, that's fantastic. We'll get a panel up just after Richard's presentation.
Can anyone hear me if I speak loudly? Can you hear me? Yeah. If I speak over here, can you hear me? Yeah. Good. In fact, can you hear me now? Can I just talk normally? Good, because then I can run around. Make me feel a little bit less nervous or loads of places in my face. Good. So, what a great speech. That was great. Now I've got to remember not to do any of that because I do that quite a lot. So if I do that, you can go bingo. So I'm Richard. I work for TechCity UK. We're based in London, and I'm going to tell you a bit about our story. But really, what am I here for today? The screen doesn't really show. I've got a lot of blue in my presentation, so you might be not able to see it. But basically, it says, what role does design and design thinking have in enabling the UK digital economy? How do we at TechCity stimulate that? What are we trying to do to enable that through entrepreneurs and innovators? Do we have a digital skills gap? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then finally, what can we do collectively to inspire the next generation of design talent in the UK? But first, let's just start with something completely different. I'd want to just talk about, because what I want to talk today is about ecosystem design at the macro level, rather than individual sort of participation. Can you see that? Anybody recognise it? This is a town in the middle of Italy. It doesn't really show the justice, called Gubbio. Gubbio is halfway down and halfway across Italy. We used to live there. When one of my children was very young, we moved there just for an adventure. This is our local town, and I remember walking and having a drink in that cafe, laughing to my wife, saying, "Hey, they've forgotten to build the 4th wall of this square. What crazy Italians, what do they know?" It's like the first week I moved to Italy. And then, of course, the sun goes down and you realise that's why. It's the most incredible view you'll ever see. When the sun goes down, you see the glory, the fields in front of you, you see the mountains ahead of you. Gubbio is actually a very religious town. So they have every year they have a procession up to the top of the mountain behind them. There's a relic of St. Osvaldo. And really the square is there to remind everybody the glory of God and the reason why they're going to the top of this thing with a massive cross on their back, which is also what they have to do. So it's a labour of love. So we do our own. We have the Tower of London, obviously designed to inspire and put fear into the hearts of the British and anyone visiting. A big iconographic image of London. It's one of the first and last things people used to see of the UK. Then you move on, we have the Tower Bridge. Clearly, that was the Port of London gateway, so the ships coming into London, it said a lot about where you were arriving to. So, you know, design was very much at the forefront of this thinking for these kind of buildings. And clearly, we've got now this arms race of similar things in London. So when I was young, the BT Tower was the tallest building in Britain, if not Europe, I think. Obviously older than you guys. Then Tower 42 came along and it was big news, and NatWest Tower, that was the biggest in London. And then actually since then we've got all these crazy things going on to the point of the Shard now, which is just the most incredible building in Europe, the tallest building in Europe. And this has a massive statement about London, about the power, about the knowledge, about the ability to execute. It's just a big, big statement about London as the centre of not just London, not just the UK, not just Europe, but the world. But I say that, and there's also clearly a massive arms race of buildings going on. This building here, the Kingdom Tower, is supposed to be 1 kilometre high. So, you know, it's just this continuous thing. And really, they're all saying a message. If you look at the design in them, they're all telling a story about the kind of country they're in, the kind of thing they want to say about the country. It's got a big narrative around each one, so it's very interesting. So here's a little trick. This is Berlin. I lived in Berlin for the last 2 years before I came back earlier this year. This is the centre of Berlin. That's the Brandenburg Gate. That's the Reichstag. But in this picture somewhere is actually Europe's tallest building. Anybody any ideas?
Down.
It's actually the Kanzleramt. It's here. It's a skyscraper on its side. It's where Angela Merkel works from. It's the seat of the kind of power in Germany. It's about 500 meters high. It was up on its end. It's been designed to line of sight. Germany doesn't really have skyscrapers. It doesn't really do that. In Frankfurt it does, but everywhere else doesn't do high buildings. And so therefore, it's a beautiful design saying, listen, we're powerful, but we're going to keep it to ourselves. It's brilliant. I recommend you visit it, although you can't get very close to it. It's a pretty private place. So, what role does design thinking play for a digital Britain? This is something I was really kind of thinking about. What is digital Britain? Right now, we're doing pretty well. It's already 100 billion. It's expected to hit 207 billion by 2016. It's already Europe's largest market, whether that's e-commerce or apps. There's massive growth here. And that's a great story. London is seen as a digital global powerhouse. All of those points there, 27% of all of job growth is digital. Oops, sorry. Over 400,000 people are employed in London, 1.45 billion of investment in 2014. It's been named #1 city of opportunity in 2014. There's over 70 co-working spaces here. There's over 40 accelerators here, and there's more international HQs than anywhere in Europe. Fantastic. And design is everywhere and everything. So if you think about artistic design, that includes music, art, all those lovely things you see. Graphic design, which is also the interpretation of need and want in marketing, and all sorts of other things. Physical design and products, we lead the world in some of these things. And then systemic, which is designing the systems that fit around everything, so we can encourage amazing things to happen. And then we're in Britain. So what does it mean for Britain? London, fantastic, but actually Britain's a big part. even the flag that we have, having lived in Germany through the 2012 Olympics, it was an incredible feeling of pride to be an expat looking back into the country to see what an amazing job we did at the Olympics. The Union Jack became a really interesting fashion symbol, icon brand logo in Germany. A lot of young people used to buy lots of things. You go around Europe, there's a lot of people who are buying products just because they have the Union Jack in them. And what does that actually mean? It means that we are England, we are Ireland, we are Wales, we are Scotland together. It's a collective part that we project to the rest of the world. It's a very, very powerful message. And as a result, we're the 80th largest country in terms of size, but we are the 5th largest country in terms of economy. We really punch above our weight, and it's all about being a sum of our parts. With London as a beating heart, but of course, the rest of the UK is a very, very important part of that. So what do we do for that? What do we do for Digital Britain? What is TechCity's real role in that sort of conversation? So we were launched by David Cameron in 2010. Very political, but he happened to be the Prime Minister at the time. We were working in that building there, which I described as, I was on the phone the other day, I said, gosh, it's not as if I'm in an ivory tower in Old Street or anything. In fact, I am exactly in an ivory tower in Old Street. And so obviously our mission is to try and radiate out towards the rest of the UK some of the great things that happen in London. These are the things we try and do. We're trying knocking down barriers to growth. Skills, talent, infrastructure, and investment are the 4 things that everybody will always tell you is in the way of their growth. So our job as TechCity in London and elsewhere is really to identify where those barriers really do exist, and just try and provide programs that help to get through them. Split into 2 areas. Bingo. We have programs for digital entrepreneurs, skills, talent, investment, and infrastructure, and then the whole ecosystem as well. So we're talking to lots of employers about how we can support and help them. And then we have these programs. So basically, we have a lot of programs that are focused all the way through, from early founder stage, all the way through to IPO and Series C, sorry. We also have cluster growth. We call clusters there, the different organisations around the UK. We try to do lots of dialogue with them. We also have international programs, and then we work very much with corporates. So if I go through these programs one by one, and by the way, all of this stuff will be on SlideShare tomorrow, so you can see all of these slides. You don't need to make this afternoon. So we have We Are ... That's all about emerging talent at school level, understanding how they can express themselves in a digital way. Just launched. I run something called the Digital Business Academy, which I'll talk about in a second. Future 50 is taking the 50 most fast-growing, powerful businesses in the UK, providing them with the support and also understanding what makes them successful and feeding it back into the ecosystem. Then we have the cluster alliances. Sorry. TechNation, HQ UK, which is basically saying the UK is the best place in the world to have your HQ. So it's an initiative of the UKTI. And then Broadband Initiative is also super important in the way that the Kilter guy was saying. Infrastructure around the UK is the one massive thing that people outside of the cities are saying is holding back their growth. There's a lot of effort with all the different providers, and he was explaining a very good situation where it's not joined up thinking. There's lots of personal interest in there, financial interest, physical interests, and our job is to try and get those all together to try and give as much of a fertile environment, sorry, do that again, to enable the growth. Okay. Future 50, these are the companies, you probably recognise many of them. You've got HouseTrip, Huddle, DataSift, TransferWise in there, Unruly, Made.com, and these are the kind of stats about them. They've raised $1 billion, $608 million in the last year. They're growing average 100% a year. 4 of them have come out raising 1.8 million. Okay. There's over 10,000 people employed. So again, we've got to try and, our job is to try and take that growth and distribute it through. So from a design point of view, we're trying to design the systems all the time that are going to make that happen in the best way possible. And this is the report we've just done, which you can get online on our website. It's called the TechNation, and it's identifying the clusters around the UK what's good, what's Bristol good at, what do they do well, what's Brighton doing, what's Edinburgh doing, what's Leeds doing. And again, it's all about joined up thinking to try and get those things filling out. Strategy, again, I'm going to race through this because it's very detailed, but it'll be on the slides you can download. But it's effectively saying we believe that digital businesses have particular needs in order to grow and flourish. We know what they are. We accelerate those growth. We deliver programs. We champion and connect. And we provide a very important feedback loop for government as well, because of course government is operating at one level, they're not really on the ground. So we provide a lot of data back to central government and our backers. We're driving the success of digital entrepreneurs by improving the supply of skills, talent, infrastructure, and investment, and make sure that goes across the UK. So how are we as TechCity trying to address what we would see as a digital skills gap? That's one of the questions. Again, you can't really read this, but effectively the challenge is at the moment, if you look at the growth rates, there's estimated just 750,000 new digital jobs required in the next couple of years to satisfy the demand. Whenever you ever talk about it, anyone, and I know this, not even in the UK, also in the west coast of America, or in New York, or in Berlin, or France, or Spain, they all have the same thing. We can't get the right guys. We want to do these things, but we can't get the right people. We're really struggling, and it's ironic because there's a lot of people out there looking for work. So we identified a gap between what they want and what we've got, which is really where our new project comes in. The DBA, Digital Business Academy, is creating founders for Digital Britain, and also it's creating talent for digital business. So it's trying to address those gaps. So what is DBA? What is Digital Business Academy? It's a partnership between TechCity and UCL. UCL provide the platform, the learning environment. We provide the energy, and we provide the partnerships in terms of content. We have 8 completely free online courses for anyone that wants to start, run, or join a digital business. They're quite involved. There's 90 hours of learning across 8 courses. It's not just consumption video, it's also tests and skills and all those kind of things, a certificate at the end. The courses have been provided by UCL, Cambridge Judge Business School, and a company called Founder Centric. And it's a mixture between strategy, theory, and actually on the ground experience. And there's more coming along. So we've got a couple coming about scale-ups. There's going to be a couple about taking a corporate to another level. We're going to look at verticals, so there'll be fintech, there'll be edtech, there'll be retail tech, available to anyone in the UK. And then the other thing is we have industry partnerships. So there are rewards. This is what it looks like. Nice and easy, quick to sign into, excuse the sales pitch, but it's just kind of what I do and what I know. And these are the rewards. So it's not just about getting a certificate, there's also tangible rewards for doing these things. So not only is it free, you also get stuff at the end of it. Right now, Mumsnet emailed me yesterday saying, I'm looking for a paid internship. Can we take one of your graduates? Hackney, they've got stuff going on in terms of free consulting sessions, helping them people to flourish in the area. Startup Institute, they give a lot of discounts for some of their courses, and we've got more and more coming in. Another paid internship offer yesterday from a company called Lawyer Fair, one of these comparison sites. So really, what we're trying to do is match needs in the market to needs from a talent point of view, because obviously then the velocity increases on the way that we're doing business. These are the kind of creatives we're in. So it's a very design-led approach. We focus very much on, yes, this is a learning platform, but really what does it do? Which is really what good design should be. It's not really what it is, it's what it does that we're trying to get across. It's a transformational product. And I think irrespective of what we're doing at DBA, it's something that I always do in all the projects I work on, is marketing is about providing that spark, design is about communicating the message, the value proposition in a way that makes people engaged and want to try it. And then hopefully, if it works, they tell their friends, and then you have the tipping point, and the flywheel going, and then our job becomes a lot easier. Another example, I was to turn my hobby making films into a business. These are the kind of things that are being ignited on our platform. You're hearing about it every day. Exciting stuff. Have I got time to quickly show the video? So just to give you an idea.
Please listen carefully.
I study hair and media makeup and I work in Arcola Theatre, but my dream is to set up my own talent agency. So I was talking to a friend and she told me about DBA, Digital Business Academy, who provide free online business courses. And I thought this would be a great way to start. So I did the first course, which was Start Up Your Idea, and it's really helped me write my own business plan, which I've been putting off for a long time. And I don't think that I would have been able to do it without DBA.
I'm currently doing an MSc in engineering, and I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship and technology. I'm currently working on an app called Orator. It's basically a mobile application that helps people to prepare their speeches and presentations. I wanted to take my business idea further, so I looked online and I found the Digital Business Academy. So I did 6 courses and they were really useful. And I also had interviews with TechCity UK and Techstars. And it was really great meeting people who are actually involved in the startup industry.
I'm a musician and I recently started a business called QuizCats. So I really wanted to develop QuizCats and make sure that business could grow and that I had the best understanding possible of how I could make that happen. I heard about DBA through a work contact who thought it would be useful for me, so I went online, had a look at the courses. I actually started with course 4, which is a marketing course, and I used that to help us create the first marketing campaign for our first QuizCats event, which ended up being a massive success. So we're really happy with everything we got from the course, found it really valuable. I've actually already started the next course. Definitely going to complete 6 of the courses because the rewards are so good. I'm really looking forward to getting the co-working space. I think that would be great because it's really hard to find space in London. And the mentoring with an established entrepreneur is also really useful, especially for me. I'm not from a business background, I don't have that many business contacts, so it's a really great opportunity.
My name's Hal Wartenberg. I'm 22 years old. I'm from South London. I'm the co-founder of Word on the Curb. So Word on the Curb is a platform for young people to creatively document their views and opinions. And the way we do that is using creative forms such as spoken word, short films, and editorials. I found out about DBA just through searching online to find out how I can grow my business. And I found a course which is absolutely free. The courses are delivered by UCL, Cambridge University, and Founder-Centric. So the courses have helped us to rebrand instantly. Like we changed our logo and we got loads of like new followers, more interactions on our social media channels. So I was really impressed with the feedback. I absolutely recommend it to not only to my friends, but to anybody who's interested in business and anybody who's interested in learning what it takes to run a business, what it takes to grow and expand a business. Definitely get on the Digital Business Academy. It's absolutely free, you can't go wrong.
DBA, make it happen.
DBA, make it happen.
DBA, make it happen.
So DBA made it happen. Hashtag DBA made it happen.
So hopefully that gives you a flavour of the kind of things we're doing. It's having an impact, it's working, it's valuable. At the moment it's kind of piloting in London, but we're going to be rolling out very strongly to the rest of the UK. And really what we're trying to do is to exploit this kind of creative talent and innovation that we see really at the kind of ground level of the communities. You don't have to go through, I mean, you guys are, you have an amazing educational background, which is fantastic, but not everybody else does. And so what we're trying to do is democratize opportunity. We're trying to get people like you just seen the opportunity in one kind of sector of the business we're doing, and then transferring it through all the different parts of business, whether that's young founders, young apprentices, older business owners, and older employees. We're just trying to just ignite those transformative journeys that we think everyone would desire to go on. Traction so far, this is a couple of, about a month old. We've already got 14,000 people onto the program in 4 months. 50 locations across the UK. Half the people are under 30, 40% are over 35. So it gives you an idea of of what we're doing. Now, we're not substituting business schools. We're complementing. We're making people thinking those ideas. We're feeding our graduates into other paid educational programs. So it's all part of the ecosystem. And that's really the point of my talk, is that there's an ecosystem under design. We're doing as best as we can to stimulate it. But at the same time, it also needs democratized design within that to bring everything up and fuel growth. So how do we inspire this next generation? How can we all do that? Really, it comes down to three things. We have a collective responsibility, so we need to understand that. We are all designers, whether we're business planners or consultants or business, all the things we're trying to do in terms of our strategy and design is all concurrent to filling those gaps in the whole life cycle of business. The other thing that's been very interesting for me is that I'm seeing now very much a stop in this kind of, we've got to be digital, we've got to get our business right. There's no difference anymore. Business is digital, digital is business. Those guys on the video don't make any distinction. As far as they're concerned, that's how they do business. There's no other way. And so we can also provide a kind of fertile environment to just really identify great design, consider it, and then celebrate it. And the street art, that's in Hoxton where our office is, but in Berlin, they encourage it. And Berlin is an amazing place where they just kind of have this huge expression of personal art, thinking, negative, positive. And as a result, you have this incredible fertile imagination collectively to get things done and to move forward. And you got a very sense of young, new, special, central, and it's a lovely feeling. And we have that around here. In this very building we have it, but we don't have it in some of the outlying parts of the UK. There's a lot of status quo, there's a lot of people with frustration, and really TechCity is all about trying to roll that through to the regions. So really the thought to leave you with is this slide which I've just kind of flashed up to you. This culture, this design culture, it's open to everybody. It's about the most honest way you can be an artist. You don't need an education to understand it, and there's no admission fee. I love that quote because it says it's down to all of us to input into this new generation, to inspire design. A lot of people in the room are at the beginning of your careers, some of them are middle, and some of them maybe towards the end. But there's no reason why we all can't collaborate to encourage London, Britain, UK, the world to improve. I think that's probably it. Thanks very much.
So ladies and gentlemen, let's do a quick changeover, get some chairs on the stage for our 5 fantastic speakers, and we'll go straight into a Q&A. Thanks. Share mine. So we'll share them around, maybe just project it into. Fantastic. So we'll wait to start. I will just get the ball rolling, if you like. I'll be very much keen to hear from the floor, and do feel free to stick your hand up when we get there. We've got a couple of people around the room with some roving microphones. So fantastic to have you all here once again. Thank you very much. You've all spoken about different sort of barriers and some of the issues in terms of making design mainstream and helping grow little startups and the economy, brands. I want to come back to one particular question, which is around around creative confidence in startups, and what is it that you've seen in your own experiences? How has design helped break down creative confidence in the startup arena?
I can answer that. I think, again, I'm not sure these microphones are working, but okay. The thing that obviously we work in incubators and accelerators all the time, so it's almost when you're starting off, you need to really design your message, your core proposition, and also make it look as if you're bigger than you are, because when you're putting your initial pitch deck together, when you're trying to get funding, I've just gone through the Mass Accelerator Challenge as a judge, and some of the ideas were fantastic, but the presentation and the kind of pitch was absolutely terrible. And you think, well, if they can't really do that now, then they're probably going to struggle. So design is absolutely critical, and just not necessarily in the size they're using, but also they're thinking about how the business will scale in the short term, and then the kinds of money that they might need as they move through. There were obviously some fantastic ones, and they've chosen 80 for their new program. But yeah, design is absolutely critical in those very, very first early stages, because you should be pitching and you should be testing, you should be doing to everybody, and you need to get your design right. Really, is one of the first principles.
Maybe a slightly different question for Sal and for Mark from IDEO, but the issue of conservatism. How have you seen your clients and your organisation that you go in, be it traditional businesses with their own stovepipes and own sets of perceived conceptions around innovation? How's that kind of changed in the last 5-10 years as a designer or other schools of thought have come into more mainstream acceptance?
I think there's quite a few things forcing businesses to change. I think we talked about a lot of the sort of changes in the kind of the market and the speed of innovation. I think the fact that an organisation like LBS has got a group like this together is going to change the generations of kind of business thinking in the future. There's no doubt that design is definitely sort of on the boardroom table more than it has been before, and that organisations are embracing the opportunities to develop very different kind of offers, new ventures, that kind of thing. As the board itself becomes more kind of creatively confident, if you like, and we definitely see some more sort of open-mindedness about, as we said, like Paul Polman, for example, Unilever, looking at how brand experience can be a way to engage audiences with new value, and then not just rely on traditional advertising models and things like that. So I think we're starting to see these changes. I think organisations ultimately only really change once they kind of go through the experience of an innovation program or a design thinking program, and that's what we find. We're always trying to sort of help organisations change by doing and learn by doing, and that's the most powerful way for people to sort of see the value of it, because and I think relating a lot to sort of the innovation to behaviours point, I think innovation is something you feel it's as much a culture and a mindset as it is a process. So you kind of need to go through it. You need to understand why there's value in having an engineer have first-hand experience, within the heart of a design process and meeting the end user and understanding their needs. That has to be. You have to do it and feel it. So that's a key thing as well.
I think there's also, so not coming from a design background, I think there's been almost a change in the definition of design. Let's say the traditional understanding of design. Because I think especially in conservative corporate environments, design and branding and that type of stuff is usually seen as a front end, nice to have, sort of glossy, shiny stuff that you put on top of the real stuff. Whereas I think there's a transformation where people are understanding design is not just what it looks like, it's actually what it does, and what it does in a really clever way. So sort of more of the constructive aspect of the process of designing something, a user experience, a product, an interaction, a service, whatever it is, all of that is design, right? So I think, having a narrow understanding of design as in colors, forms, shapes, and brands, to simplify, I think it's important. But if you focus only or too much on that and don't actually look at the whole stuff that leads to it, I think you might lose more conservative businesses. On the upside, I think, as I said, the thinking is changing and people are understanding more and more that going through that type of shaping, building exercise together with people from different backgrounds, with people who are engineers and people who can develop a nice brand identity, that actually adds value.
I'm sure this won't answer the question at all, but my personal experience of big brands is as yours will be in day-to-day experiences. And I happen to live in London and work in Glasgow. And so I go up to Glasgow once a week. I get the 5:30 train in the morning. I work with the only option I have, which is Virgin Trains. Now let's look at Virgin Trains. They're a brand who are well known for being very, very big on design first, thinking about the user, etc., etc. But I think they're a wonderful example for me of a brand that's lost its way slightly, where it's not looking enough at the user journey again. So I wake up at quarter past 4. I'm really tired. I get on the train at 5:30. The last thing I need is bright lights in the cabin and 5 tannoy announcements at every stop. Warrington Bank Quay, 5 announcements per stop. Now, I mean, I don't need to be told 5 times, nor does anyone else who's been on the train from London and has heard it at Rugby, at Watford Junction, and goodness knows what else. Now, so I'm kept awake the entire way through this. So I started a campaign against Virgin Trains on Twitter, hashtag Bing Bong, and every time they Bing Bonged me, I Bing Bonged them back. Eventually, they stopped listening to me, and so I started copying in Richard Branson. And we've now got a situation where they've actually taken all of the trains in and had the tannoy system redesigned, and they're rolling it out at the moment. But why I think they were wrong was that it took me 6 months of Bing Bonging them on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the message to get to someone who could make a decision and to move it forward. What I wanted to know was, and I asked it repeatedly, Richard Branson, have you sat on the 5:30 train to Glasgow on a Tuesday morning? Clearly the answer is no, because had he'd have said, this is ridiculous, let's change it. And I think what's really interesting is that you mentioned at the beginning that actually you need to get these people in and immerse them in the experience that they're trying to force down other people's throats and get them to really experience it. Because I know for a certainty, if you went to some of the big Wi-Fi providers and sat them down, take them out of their glossy towers and put them in a cafe in the middle of Burton-on-Trent and say, right, get on the internet, they would be sitting there going, Christ, what a disaster this is. So honestly, I think design in these corporations is often strangled by a lack of credible experience in the higher echelon of those businesses. And I'm all for take the campaign to them, because honestly, if you shout loud enough, eventually you'll be heard. And I think we should all be pushing for better design everywhere we see it. I'm sure that didn't answer the question.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great story of power to the consumers. We might open up to the floor. I know there's a lot of people out there who've got a question. Maybe just put your hands up. There's a few people walking around with microphones. So maybe start that here at the front.
Hi there. Can you describe how qualitative research, ethnography, and human-centered design actually come together in the digital context? How would you put it into practice?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
I don't want to
I'm
not going to answer it. How does it come together? So you're trying to understand, obviously, kind of the context of kind of usage of people's aspirations with ethnography. So you're trying to also find out what really matters to people, sometimes beyond what they say. I guess you're trying to gather a whole load of inspiration for what might make a difference to people in their lives, beyond sometimes what they may be able to articulate. We did a project with Bank of America a while back whereby we were trying to understand how to create more interest in savings products for mums with young families. And they're a group who aspired emotionally to save, didn't think that they had the time or the resources to save, but actually through observing them demonstrated an awful lot of savings behaviours in the way that they rounded up their change when they bought a coffee and put it in the extra change from $2, whatever, into their dashboard, or the way they overpaid on utility bills by small amounts and just was squirreling stuff here, there and everywhere. So we created this rounding up mechanism called Keep the Change with a debit card, and that was very, very successful. And this came through observing kind of latent needs. I guess you then when you're more in a sort of formative stage of research, you're then maybe trying to recreate as much as you can a kind of, you know, the real context of people's lives when you've got a solution on the table, and that's you know, you can sort of simulate that in various ways. Everything from, you know, we're working with a direct digital brand, for example. We've created everything from a living room environment where actually people are sort of browsing magazine style on an iPad, and so you sort of try and create that. And everything from the call center interactions to the way something's delivered at the door and service behaviours. So I suppose you're always trying to put a real context in place if you can. You know, we've done kind of some very sort of launch to learn experiments with brands as well, where they actually go live, you know, more like a sort of startup would, and learn from a very sort of small launch or something. But I mean, as Richard was saying, you know, digital is business, right? So very rarely are you developing something that is just a digital experience, very rarely. And so it's about understanding the ecosystem, I guess, as well. It is the brand experience for that person. So that was a very long-winded, waffly answer. So I don't know where that got us really, but
yeah, I can add just in terms of my personal point of view is that those three things do happen, but they kind of as a downstream part of an agile process. So when you're launching something from the ground, you kind of, I mean, I talk to a lot of people about this in the startup world, is that they have a very fixed view of what they're doing, who they're serving. But in the end, when you launch your product, you end up finding that it's a different set of people completely. Different set of people that are actually using your product. So if you look at something like Pinterest, Pinterest was never designed to be a website for women to talk about some of the things they're interested in. But that's what it turned out into. It was never designed for that. And you know, the whole agile process is about test, iterate, learn, and keep going on. So the three things you mentioned, ethnography, is it qualitative or quantitative and user-centric? You can do that in vivo. I mean, you're doing that as you're looking at my DBA. We've got a dashboard which is completely live. We can see loads of stuff. We're pulling in data from Twitter, from Facebook, from LinkedIn. We know a lot about the people who are coming through the systems, and they watch it all the time. If we see something bubbling up, then we'll nail into it really quickly. So that's kind of the new way of iterating your way to perfection. The reason I know about this way is because I spent a lot of time in, again, Berlin, for a company called Rocket Internet. And Rocket Internet have poured billions into lots of different businesses. But at the very, very heart of their business is data and understanding and insight. And the ability to anticipate in an almost machine-led way niches and sectors that they can just dive, push money to very quickly and get a return very quickly. So that's the kind of thing, that's my experience. I don't think I've seen many things except when I was at Nokia, which is lots of programs around those areas. It takes ages. With all due respect, it just takes ages. And there's no serendipity built in, which is what you need, because you need to know that when you're building something might go wrong, and then therefore it might work out in your favor. So I think that's my own personal point of view. That helps. It's not really an answer, but that's my point of view.
I suppose my view on it is, I think these things are way too complicated. My grandfather was 5 when he was orphaned, and he was in a town called Ahmedabad in India, and he made a living. His brother was 12, and he and his brother made a living by buying packets of cigarettes, 20s, and selling them as singles. And that was it. And by the time he died, he owned 2 grocery shops. And you know, it was a reason. But he had one mantra always, and even when he was retired, all his minions used to come up to him and ask him for advice. He used to sit on this hitch car and they'd come and say, "Well, what do we do?" And he just used to say, "Well, business is only about one thing. It's about working out what you can buy for one and what you can sell for 2, right? And it's really as straightforward as that. And you can do ethnography and qualitative, yada, and get all into these techniques and processes. But if you forget the very, very simple fact of business that my grandfather taught me, which is buy for 1, sell it for 2, right? You're probably barking up the wrong tree. And I see so many people get so absorbed in all these processes and forget that very, very simple. So forgive me for being a little bit what's it called, Neanderthal about it. But I really believe that, you know, a lot of these things get in the way more than help.
Although sometimes a single decision can be £100 million. So sometimes you have to mitigate those decisions.
Of course, with
risk
I
mitigation.
understand.
So there's a place for it.
Hi, this is a question for you, Sal. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really inspiring. My question really is, you've explained now what characteristics are of innovative people. There's a lot of people here in the room, I guess, that have had a different career before, who might want to switch. Your third element was, how do you find innovative people? But how do we, or people here in the room, what do they need to do in order to be attractive for you and maybe for IDEO as well? What is it really that you look for? Is it something that you need to have experience in, or is it just show up on an interview, answer the question about, you know, one of the questions that you sent, and
Yeah, I mean, it's really the second. I mean, it kind of depends on what level you want to come in, on how much money you want to earn. Right? But if you want to come in at a reasonably junior level and you don't want to earn a lot of money, then you just show up and we'll have the right conversation. I mean, we've been going for 23 years now, so I suppose in that time, personally, I must have hired 500, 600, 700 people, that sort of order. And so I think we sort of back ourselves to get it right probably 60% of the time. I mean, I think 60% is good, by the way. I don't think you're ever going to beat 60. And if you do beat 60, then you don't take enough risks, in my view. But really, I mean, I've been through the mill on lots of things. I think there's no substitute for just a really good series of conversations. Yeah, at a junior level, we don't look for a load of experience. I think one important thing, though, is, and this is true in consulting, in my view, is that I think consultants can be a little bit clever. Yeah, you know, they can be a bit sort of strategic and a bit outside the real world of what actually needs to be done in a business. And so I think it's very important that people can empathise what it's like to actually make decisions rather than just talk about decisions. And so I suppose one of the things I will look at is not necessarily in your career, but maybe in your hobbies or outside work or whatever. Have you actually taken decisions, and have you lived with decisions? Have you lived with bad decisions? Because that will really help you empathise with the kind of clients that we would work with.
Can I follow up with a question actually for you?
For me?
Yeah,
oh,
for
wow.
you.
That's not allowed.
Oh, sorry. Can someone? I'll ask the question. Can you answer that? I was just curious. What do you think about teamwork? Because I feel that sometimes you have, what did you say, one mad and one measured person,
Yeah.
maybe with emphasis, right? A
Yeah.
little bit mad.
Yeah.
And I've made the experience that those pairings or teams actually work really well too, and it doesn't have to be one person that is everything.
No, it's a good question. I've got quite a, as with most things in life, I've got quite a strong philosophy around it. I've got this thing I draw, which is like a sort of, sorry, it's a diagram, which is like a sort of figure of 8, but with a small bit and a big. Well, what I mean by that is, I think if someone's totally mad and haven't got any measure around them at all, right, they're actually never going to be a good team player. Yeah? So I think you have to be able to empathise with someone else's skill set. Yeah. Even if you don't necessarily have it yourself. So you have to be a little bit good at something to be able to empathise with it, and then recognise you're not very good, and then teaming works really well. I think when you team people who are completely different to each other, I think in my view, it falls down, because they actually can't value what each other's bringing to the party. But
yeah, makes sense. I think a little bit. I was listening to you and I was thinking, well, there are a few people who are really 50-50 of everything.
Yeah.
But if you have 10% of the measured and 90% mad, then you have someone who's the opposite, that works really well.
Yeah, and by the way, when I was making the presentation, I didn't mean everyone should be 50 on each. But I think good innovators have to have a bit of each, at least in some proportion.
Maybe at the back.
Hi, thank you all for your presentation today. And we've heard a lot on how is design impacting the way we do business. I'm curious, what's your view on how is this relationship impacting the way you do design? Maybe Chris.
We go to where the business is. In terms of sectors. I mean, we try. We like to think, we do occasionally, and we try to shape design challenges we can do with organizations, because it's quite fun to be proactive like that, and if it comes off, that can be an incredibly rewarding experience. But most of the time, we're going to where the business is. We're a business where you have to respond to the market. I guess, the consulting business is a tough business to be in the sense that we're a design consultancy that, like, I don't know, it's interesting. It kind of relates to a thought I had just now when we were talking about how we employ people, and we were trying to recruit a design director recently in digital. We ended up with a lot of people to the point that's been made who came along as sort of strategists. We don't really need strategists as such. We need people who can make design decisions, who come up through the design ranks. And I think what we find is that strategy processes are a lot more commoditized as an area of consulting. So really being able to help an organization actually deliver the doing is kind of where you need to be able to kind of prove your value very, very quickly. I'm conscious I'm waffling a bit, but I mean we respond to the market. We've developed a whole sort of platform side to our business to try and work out if we can make money whilst we sleep. The consulting game is a tough business. We now have a lot of licensed businesses as well. I'm sure you'll testify to how difficult consulting it can be. So yeah, I mean we are. I think the increasing design literacy, as we talked about earlier at the boardroom, is certainly helping us. But the UK is relatively design illiterate compared to, I think, relatively in the sense that design thinking is still, I think, quite embryonic in business in the UK compared to other parts of the world. And that's starting to change.
So we talked a bit about the innovative individual, we talked a bit about the innovative team. So I guess maybe this is a question for the consultants who actually work with clients, but the clients are actually companies. So in terms of the clients you work with, they come to you with interesting problems and you devise some interesting solutions, maybe beginnings of solutions. If you could kind of describe the ideal company that really can actually take innovation and really drive it forward, what are some of the key characteristics that you've seen with your most successful clients?
Well, I'll be very quick on this because the commitment to launch something is really, really important. That really helps. Senior leadership kind of buy-in to obviously kind of being able to sort of take a few chances along the way. That really, really, really helps. The kind of degree of comfort with failure, which sounds obviously a bit ridiculous, but that needs to be there in the mindset. Yeah, I mean, interesting that hiring and firing is a big part of what it does. Is, so often the wrong type of people are the big obstacle, and so that needs to be sorted out as well. Yeah.
So I think it's a journey looking at it from inside a company, what we call an innovation maturity model, or the readiness to innovate and the ability to follow through with that in a company. That's a process. And I think very often, or maybe always, the process, well, very often, starts from the outside. So even our team, in a way, we're an outside team because we work on our own profit and loss. We bring in external grants to de-risk something that the company wouldn't necessarily always be willing to do. So we're almost like a startup associated with Cisco more than for Cisco. So we're bringing a capability from the outside, and we're growing that risk affinity, thinking, doing things differently, willing to test things out, willing to fail, willing to do it again, iterative. You need a certain level of autonomy. And then I think what happens is you need to bring that step by step closer to the core of the company by establishing structures and processes that can be repeated. So one thing is like, oh, I have a brilliant idea, let's do that. And the other thing is, well, what if we have 15 brilliant ideas? How do we decide which one to take? And how do we do idea, 1, 5, 7, and 11? How do we do that time after time? You need to establish a model, a process, something like that. a funnel. And then it's about bringing it back to the core, but also finding that balance between embedding it in the company and staying independent enough and autonomous enough so that you can go against the grain. Because we still, from my experience, we still do things sometimes that the company doesn't think are worth doing, necessary, aligned enough with the current business objective, aligned enough with the quarterly sales objective, whatever it is, with the mainstream goals and objectives of the company. If you're innovating, you're going to be going against those. So you have to have a model and a process set up that you can repeat and that is respected in the company, but that also allows you to do things in a little bit of a different way. And I think outside consulting can really help with that. But if you don't manage to embed it in your company culture, maybe not in the mainstream, but somewhere in the company, you won't be able to repeat that.
I've got perspective on that. So can you hear me all right? I think it's a brilliant question, by the way, superb question. And I think it's all about the individuals. I think if I look back on all the projects we've done, the ones that have been really, really successful have been characterized by the right team. Yeah. And when you look at the individuals from a client point of view, there is something about, what's the best way of saying this? Like when a big company can act like a small company, yeah, then it tends to be more innovative. Yeah. And what I mean by that is in big companies, you quite often come across people who are actually not thinking about the end result. They're actually thinking about how to sell a piece of logic to the next level of management, or how to get things on board, or they'll worry about things like alignment and yada yada, right? Whereas if you talk to a small company, they're just worried about how are you going to get that company to improve. Yeah, it's very interesting. There was this study done of Terry Leahy actually led it after he left Tesco of 10 privately owned multinationals, so companies like SC Johnson, like Tata, like this, and he contrasted them with 10 companies of exactly the same size and pretty much the same age who were publicly owned. Yeah? He tracked them over the course of 30, 40 years or whatever it is, and concluded that their business results were about the same. Yeah? But then he made a very interesting point, which was, well, how is this possible? If the war for talent is so important, right? These 10 companies have got a talent pool of 7 billion people from which to choose their CEO. And these 10 companies have got a talent pool of 5 people from which to choose their CEO, right? So how is it possible that they can have similar-ish results? Yeah? And his conclusion was all about what you're poking at there, which was, actually, if you can start acting like a small company, you can empathize with what that company needs to do, rather than the interim steps of how you need to get committees together or align people up or go to global meetings and present things on deadline or whatever it is. And you can actually start looking at how can you take this company forward. You'll generally innovate better because your eyes are on the end game. They're not on the interim game.
Could I just sort of say that I'm working with someone at the moment who has managed to create a cult, essentially. And the CEO is essentially the leader of the cult. And everyone believes it. Everyone believes what they build. Everyone believes what they're doing. They're all going in the same direction. And it's infectious. And the reason it's infectious is because it's a dream. And I think what's really interesting, anywhere I've seen real success, I've seen the figureheads or figurehead of that business being a real dream weaver. They are capable of inspiring other people, and they're capable of bringing an infectious, top-down concept that everyone can buy into. Now, what's important is they also celebrate each individual member of a team's capabilities and allow, as to your point, they listen, but they're also sometimes incredibly bullish. So they're quite happy to say to someone in an open forum, that's a really stupid idea, but they'll also come back to them and nurture them. Another one of the key points you mentioned, they'll nurture their ideas as well. So it's about, to me, it's about that company ethos that is infectious. It's a dream. If everyone buys into the dream, then that small company inside a big company ethos can be maintained, because the small company is in each and every one employee. But when those individual employees start to lose focus of the dream, start to lose focus on what the idea that everyone's pulling in the same direction is about, that's when you start seeing sort of cancers growing inside businesses. And what's amazing is watching how quickly that can spread through a team. So I think anybody who wants to get involved in a business and wants to help take that business somewhere has to really buy into the dream that the person that's interviewing you is talking about, and try to convey to them that you really get it. Because, you know, one thing you mustn't do is pretend that you get it and then spend 6 years of your life battling uphill, because that is a complete waste of everybody's time. Try and work for something that you really believe in, something that really inspires you, and with people who do the same, and then the whole company benefits, and potentially you could rise to the top of that business. Particularly if you immerse yourself in the very base of that business. So, you know, if you're in manufacturing, I've worked once with a manufacturing business, and the chief engineer had never been to any engineering school. He'd never done anything down a core education that we understand in China. He started out on the factory line building bits on the conveyor belt, and he worked his way up and became the most incisive and incredibly inspiring engineering director for that business. So, you know, I think it's a lot of different things. But,
just very quickly, I think it's also, you know, what are you measuring as a business? So if your only obsession, both at a kind of overall level and at an individual's career progression level, is the, you know, some short-term, but being overly simplistic now, because this is, you know, it's easier said than done, but the short-term profitability of that business, if that's the only thing you're measuring and rewarding people on, then you're never going to get a true innovation culture. So the metrics are really, really important, and shifting those.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for your presentation. It's really interesting. Just wondered, the innovation and sort of companies being innovative, it's almost become quite sort of a buzzword at the moment. And what I'm curious to know is, when you're selling in these services essentially to, you know, big companies, SMEs, is there a sort of, what's the general appetite for taking on and engaging with consulting firms like yourselves, or are you faced with a similar crop of industry clients? So is there sort of a bias towards certain sectors that are interested in being more innovative, or are you generally faced with a certain type of sector and a certain type of industry that are interested in being innovative, and with others there are lots of higher barriers to entry with regard to working with them?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a sweet spot where you're either doing too well or you're doing too badly. And in either circumstance, you're not very interested in innovation, right? Because if you're doing too well, I mean, I worked years ago, I worked in the spirits, the alcohol industry, right? The Johnny Walker Blue Label, I don't know, have you ever drunk Johnny Walker Blue Label, right? It sells for, I think, something like £110, £116 or so per bottle, right? The whiskey that goes into, the actual liquid whiskey that goes into that costs less than £1, yeah? So £119.05, right, is squabbled over by trade margin, by people who supply boxes, by people who paint the label, by the taxman, by whatever, yeah? When you're doing that well, and people are buying it, yeah? When you're doing that well, right, you're not actually that worried about innovation. What you're worried about is how the hell do you negotiate your share of that £119.05, yeah? Same time at the other end of the extreme, when everything is going horribly wrong, and you see this in the supermarket industry at the moment, right? When they are so worried about Aldi, they're so worried about Lidl, they're so worried about thinking everything. They're headless chickens. They're running around like crazy, chopping prices, doing deals, whatever. No one's really worried about innovation. They just want to kind of like to survive. Yeah. But then in the middle, there's this sweet spot where people can see that actually disaster might be looming. So if you talk to the pharmaceutical industry, for example, at the moment, it's fine, right? But actually they're seeing their rate of patents just dropping off, right? You know, and it's slowly getting slower and slower and slower, yeah? And now they're thinking, oh my God, right? Okay, the world's not going to collapse tomorrow, right? In the same way supermarket changes, but actually we need to put some different things in place, and we need to work differently. So I think a lot of it's about not being at either end of that kind of like, you know, complacency or disaster spectrum, but having enough foresight. And then when you look at pretty much every industry we're working in, there is some looming problem, right? Be it health, be it environmental, be it regulatory, be it whatever. There is some looming problem. But if you can be in that middle ground, then you're likely to want to do something about it.
I would just very quickly say that another reason why consulting is quite a tough game is that, well, it's creative consulting, if you like, kind of what if an IDEO do is that, a creative exploration process is something that either you have to have a certain you have to have a certain amount of resource to do it if your mindset is that that's a cost to the business, it's a cost thing, or you have to have a certain progressive mindset to see it as a sort of opportunity for growth. When McKinsey will go in and say, well, we can, we'll cost you 10 million quid, but we can see now we can save you 100 million quid. That's a bit of a no-brainer. So when you're trying to sell a kind of creative exploration, it's tough. It's tough to, and so you do get certain clients with certain resources or certain mindsets that work better for that than others.
When she was answering a question, she just said about sometimes you have a very big problem when you have a kind of 50 very great ideas, and you have to decide between them which one you will invest your time and money. And I think it happened without you. I would like to know how you do that and what's the parameters that you think is the most important parameters to decide if an idea is good or not. When you are very in the early stage, it's like you just have an idea. You don't have any tests or things like that.
I think it's not a point in time. I think it's a process, even in the early stage. So, what's the goal of what you're trying to do? Are you deciding on a new product? How much are you willing to invest, or are you looking at a proof of concept? So, I think the first thing I would say is scale. Go at a really small scale first. So, build an environment or build a proof of concept that's really in a lab or in one street rather than a whole city for filter. And then we go through different aspects. We look at it from different perspectives. So in the technology business that I'm in, we look at technological feasibility. So there's an idea, but with the current resources and knowledge products that we have, is it something that we can do in a time frame of we usually look at about 2 years out? Because from our perspective, there's a bigger difficulty in investing something that is like 5 years out from market, because we won't see the return soon enough. So technological feasibility, operational feasibility, do we have the right people in the team or in the company? Can we find them to develop this idea together? We look at the context. What's the political context? Is there an environment that is conducive to the type of product that we're developing? Are there regulations, laws, energy savings, or air pollution regulations, things like that? Well, if we have a solution for an issue, as we discussed earlier, there's an environment where this will work. We look at the financial structure, so how much do we have to invest into developing this idea? How much are we hoping to get out of it? There are a lot of different elements, basically, that we need to look at. So it's not like this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. It takes us a lot of time to play through all of these different things and then to find the right partners. For example, we work in a collaborative environment. Sometimes we have a really good idea, but we don't have the right partner to do it, or sometimes we have a partner, and we like what they do, but we don't really see how we can connect enough on a joint project or a joint product to move forward with it. Sometimes it needs to be the right time. When is the right time to develop something? We have stuff, in the drawer where we're just waiting for the right moment to engage in it. So I think it's a lot of different aspects.
I'd like to say I spent some time working at Nokia. Nokia is a very interesting business, and I was in there when it was going through a really bad time. And ideas are very easy. Execution is very difficult.
Yeah.
And so what Nokia did very cleverly at sort of one stage in their lives was to say, we realise that, and therefore we encourage everybody who has a good idea to patent it. And now Nokia patents make most of their money. They divested their mobile phones to Microsoft, and now they make super profits from patents in everybody else's mobile phones. So just because you have an idea and you can't execute it doesn't mean that idea doesn't have value. It's just a case of how you're going to get to reach the market, either yourself or through other parties. You kind of negotiate that journey yourself. But yeah, execution is very difficult. I'm not really an ideas person. I'm more an execution person, and I like it because it's hard. It's one of those things that I enjoy. I see ideas all the time, but you think, well, that's never going to work, or you're never going to do it, or else. But I think that point about ideas being easy and execution difficult is to remember that when you're going through your corporate journey.
we find clients often want roles to be black and white. It makes it easier. But design is a very messy business. We're often trying to encourage clients, don't lurch off to some quant study right early on before you've allowed an idea to truly gestate and develop, and go through some cycles to work out. As we just said, it's about how you deliver it rather than necessarily what it is sometimes as well. So you have to go through some development loops before you start shutting things down. Otherwise, you're just wasting everyone's time, effort, and money. So I think also when I work a lot in brand experience, as I said, so I'm developing quite often ecosystems of things to deliver an experience. Very hard to sort of slice it up and quant test bits of it and then really truly get the value of an ecosystem. So we would maybe run a pilot where we're trying to sort of put a real context around it in the marketplace so that it gives the client some reassurance that there's sort of robust data we're collecting because there's real usage around something. And then work with kind of business designers like yourselves to understand the trade-offs that business needs to consider in terms of the cost potentially at scale versus the benefits in terms of new revenue or brand metrics, and then also what assumptions they need to test in the next stage. I think that's iteration and kind of not ruling an idea out until you've developed it basically.
Ladies and gentlemen, I might just jump in there. We're going to have to call an end to the formalities of today. But to Chris, Maria, Oliver, Sal, and Richard, please put your hands together. It's been fantastic to have you all. There may be an opportunity at the end to have a conversation to continue if you have any extra questions. But once again, thank you very much for coming along. We're incredibly pleased to be able to bring this to you. If anybody out there is in the audience who's at all interested in coming to campus or wanting to talk more about what the Design Club can do in terms of providing student access, if you have projects that you need resources for, or indeed if you just have interesting thought leadership that you'd like to share with the world, please have a conversation. Once again, my name is Graham. I'd just like to do a couple of shout outs to the team. So first of all to David, Zahor and Pava, who were our founding members and the MBA 2015 class who really got the whole thing started. Thank you very much. And to today, the team in particular, to Vijay, Sahil and Chantal, who've really come together to pull this off. So thank you very much once again and have a great afternoon.